Okay, so this week's parasha we have the continuation of the 10 makot, right? We have last week's parasha we had 7 and this week 3, so we have arbe choshech and makat bechorot. So it starts off with arbe, the plague of locusts, right? Swarm onto Mitzrayim, right? And they eat up all of the crops, all the vegetation that the barad left over, right? That's what the pasuk says, that Moshe and Aaron come to Paro and they say, "Hineni mevi mahar arbe b'gvulecha b'chisa et en haaretz." It's going to cover it's going to become dark. It's going to be so dark because the swarm of locusts are going to cover the sky. V'lo yuchal lirot et haaretz. Also, you won't be able to see the land. Ve'achal et yeter hapeleta anisheret lachem min habarad. Ve'achal et kol ha'etz hatzomech lachem min hasadeh. Right, etc. But there's also a very important statement that Moshe Rabbeinu tells to Paro. He says that umalu batecha ubatecha la'avadecha ubatecha Mitzrayim asher lo ra'u avotecha v'avot avotecha miyom meyotam ad adama. Right. So he's describing a plague of locusts that are going to be so crazy, right, that your forefathers never saw such a thing. And then later on, when it actually happens, it says vayala arbe al kol eretz Mitzrayim vayanach b'chol givul Mitzrayim. Kaved meod lefanav lo hayachen arbe kamo ve'acharav lo yihi yachen. Right. So the Torah itself is promising that acharav lo yihi yachen. This plague that was in the time of Paro and Mitzrayim was such a terrible plague of locusts that there will never be such a thing ever again. Now we'll have to see what that means. It'll never be ever again. Is it going to be in Mitzrayim? Is it never going to be ever again? Or this type of plague is ever going to be again, right? But that's what the Torah is saying. It means it's a terrible type of plague. We obviously know in general what it is that there's a swarm of locusts. They come and they eat all the crops. But in modern times, around 2020, they had also a crazy locust plague in Africa and in Saudi Arabia and in Yemen, right? And the way they describe it is that the insects, they could consume 2 grams of vegetation every day, and they could reach the densities of 80 million grasshoppers per square kilometer. You have a square kilometer, right? 80 million grasshoppers, right? And they eat, a swarm of 80 million can consume food equivalent to that eaten of 35,000 people a day, right? So what 35,000 people eat in one day, right? The 80 million could just consume like this, right? So 35,000 people now don't have food for that day, right? And then they move on to the next. Right, there's much more than just 80 million, right? So it's really a crazy plague that, I've never seen such a thing, right? You can see videos online, you can see exactly, how it looks like, but it's really a terrible plague, which the pasuk is saying that it's never going to happen again, right? What's interesting is that in Sefer Yoel, in the Trei Asar, he also makes an interesting statement. So Rashi here asks a question that in Sefer Yoel, he also says that there will be a plague of locusts that was never ever in the time, right? Was this ever in your time, right? And he says again, he explains, right? So Yoel is describing not just one type of locust, arbe. There's a few different species, and that's going to become very important in halacha. What are the differences between the different types of species? And Rashi says that what Moshe Rabbeinu means, what it says in the Torah, is that the swarm of locusts that were in Mitzrayim were one type of locusts. But Yoel is talking about a plague of locusts that there's a lot. There's a lot of different types, right? So that there could be a great plague of locusts later on, right? So we're already seeing in Tanakh itself, right, we see different descriptions of different types of plague of locusts, right? So in the time of Moshe, it was just arbe, and that was the biggest plague of arbe that ever was going to happen. But in the time of Yoel, he's describing another plague, but that consisted of different species together, and therefore that's also considered an amazing type of makkah that never was ever again, right? Now, the pasuk also says, and that tells us that after the locusts, after the grasshoppers ate up all the stuff, lo nish'ar arbe echad b'chol givul Mitzrayim. Right? And Rashi says it's so that the people shouldn't eat the grasshoppers after all their food is consumed. So at least we have the grasshoppers to eat. Grasshoppers are 62% protein and 17% fat, right? So it's a great nutritional value, especially if you're left with no food. Because the grasshoppers came, they ate up all the crops. So what do? The natural thing to do is that in all these places, what they do is they eat the grasshoppers, right? Because that's what you have left. You're starving, there's no food, so you got to eat the grasshoppers, right? So therefore, the makkah of Arbe had a makkah betocha makkah. It was a plague within a plague. Was that not only is there going to be locusts that are going to eat up all your grasshoppers, or eat up all your crops, right? They're not even going to be around, and so you're going to be hungry even afterwards. Lo nish'ar arbe echad b'chol gevul Mitzrayim, right? Is now we understand is mamash. Another makkah within the makkah, because usually when there's a plague of grasshoppers, you're able to eat the grasshoppers themselves. Right? The Gemara Masechet Shabbat tells us in the laws of tzeda, in trapping on Shabbat, that grasshoppers are very easy to trap. And if you look it up, you'll see that the way that at night the grasshoppers go to sleep, and especially when the dew comes up, so that the ground is cold overnight, right? They freeze. The grasshoppers freeze, whether it's on the trees or on the ground. So you could just swoop down and pick it up. And the question is, on Shabbat, is there a problem of trapping? You're not allowed to trap a fish on Shabbat. You're not allowed to trap an animal, a deer on Shabbat. But the Gemara says this is already trapped because it's frozen, right? So you see that the Gemara is discussing taking grasshoppers. Maybe in the time of the Gemara, right, they even ate grasshoppers. We'll see. The Gemara discusses, Masechet Berachot discusses what the bracha is on grasshoppers. Is it she'akol niya b'dvaro, right? Or is it you can't make a klala, you can't make a bracha because it's a siman klala, right? It's a curse. So you see that we're discussing eating grasshoppers, right? Now. Huh? We'll get to it. Sfaradi, maybe even Ashkenazim. We'll talk about it, right? But also the pasuk in Parashat Shelach, when the Meraglim go to Eretz Yisrael, what do they say? Vanihi be'enenu kachagavim, v'chen hayinu be'enehem, right? That we, in our eyes, were like grasshoppers, because they were giants, right? And Nephilim, they were giants, and we were grasshoppers in their eyes. And maybe you could say, based on this Gemara, right, that what is not just that they were tiny, but also that the grasshopper is frozen and it's so easy to trap him, right? So maybe they were saying that we were like frozen in fear from these giant people, and we were so easily able to be captured by them, right? So again, you see the Torah itself, the Meraglim themselves are using the imagery of the Chagavim. Chagavim was something that was part of their life. Now, indeed, in Parashat Shmini, right, the Torah tells us all the animals that are asur to eat because they're tameh, right? So it goes and starts with the regular animals, and then goes to the insects and the bugs and the snakes, and then at the end, the Torah actually talks about arbe, right? That indeed there is a type of insect that's kosher. The Torah is mefurash in the Torah, right? So we can read the pasuk in Parashat Shemini. The pasuk says, "Ach et zeh tochelu mikol sheretz ha'of ha'holech al arba." This you could have from sheretz. What's sheretz ha'of? Is an insect that flies, right? So it's like a mosquito, an insect that flies. Sheretz ha'of, right? It's creepy, crawly type of thing, sheretz, but it's ha'of, it flies, right? So of the type of insects that fly, right, this is the only type you could eat. What is it? It's ha'holech al arba. It goes on 4 legs. Asher lo kera'ayim mima'al l'raglav. It has knees on top of its feet, right? And this is going to be a very important siman the Torah is telling you, right? If you see the picture over here, right, you have here 4 feet, right? Ha'holech al arba has 4 feet, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But then also asher lo kera'ayim mima'al l'raglav. Right, so there's on top of its legs, the Torah is describing these knees. These knees are kira'ayim imal raglav lenater bahem al haaretz, so that it jumps, it leaps on the ground. Right, et ele mehem tochelu et arbe lemino. The Torah is now giving names of the certain species. It's arbe is fine, solam lemineu, chargol lemineu, and echagav lemineu. Right, but if it's not that, except for these, it's mamash asur. But these are the only exceptions where it's going to be mutar. Right, so the Torah is telling you beferush, it's 100% mutar. 100% mutar. Now, why is the Torah making an exception? We don't know. The Torah, the Torah prohibits the animals that are tameh, and this is not tameh. This is fine, right? But perhaps there's a special need, right, to be able to eat these locusts after a famine, right? Maybe, and perhaps if someone wants to give a ta'ameh mikra, you could say that maybe this is exactly the reason, is because there's a big tzorech to have these things. But who knows? We don't really know the ta'amim, the deep secrets of why certain things are mutar, certain things are asur. But al kol panim, it's mefurash over here that it's mutar. Now the Mishnah in Masechet Chulin, brings this halacha lemaaseh. Daf Nuntet Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, "Uvachagavim kol sheyesh lo arba raglaim, arba knafayim." It also has to have 4 wings. That it doesn't say in the Torah, but that the Mishnah knows, right? That it has to have four legs, 4 wings. Kartzulaim, those are the keraim, those are the knees that we're talking about. The knafav hofim et ruba, and also the wings have to cover a majority of the animal. The Gemara is going to end up saying a majority of its length and its width, the circumference. It has to be that the wings are big enough that they cover the whole thing. Then Rabbi Yossi says a very important thing. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Ushmo Chagav. It has to be called Chagav, which means that even if you have all these 4 simanim, it sounds like Rabbi Yossi is saying that it has to be called Chagav. No. Arbe Solam, those has to be that these are mutar, right? But he's saying that the word Chagav, he must mean, right, that as long as you have the proper name and you know it's an Arbe, right, or it's a solam, or it's a chargol, or a chagav. One of the ones of the Torah is called chagav, right? So he's saying that it's not enough to have the simanim. You need to actually know that it's called chagav, or it's called arbe, it's called solam, it's called chargol, right? You have to know the name, right? And if you have a tradition that this is what the Torah was talking about, right? So then it's fine. But if not, it seems from the Rabbi Yossi that it's going to be a problem, right? But in the Mishnah, it's a machloket. Machloket in the Mishnah. We have a dispute. The Tanna Kama just seemed to say all you need is the 4 simanim. That's it, right? And if you find a grasshopper wherever you are, you look at it. You say, look, there's 4 legs, there's 4 wings, there's knees. Right? No problem. And that's right. In Chanami, you're 100% right. According to Rabbi Yossi, once you have the name, once you have you're right, 100%. Once you have the name, once you have the tradition, you wouldn't need the simanim. And that's what, but that's what Rabbi Yossi would be telling you, is that you need the tradition, and it's not enough to have the simanim, right? Right, exactly. Now, the question is, who are we posek like, right? What's going to be the halacha? Is the halacha like Rabbi Yossi, that you need a tradition, or it's enough to have just the simanim? So the Rif, the Beit Yosef brings this in Siman Pei Hey, right? And the Beit Yosef says that the Rif is posek. He holds you do not need to have a tradition. So you don't. All you need is simanim. So according to Rabbeinu Arif, you could literally go out and just find a grasshopper with the four signs and eat it, no problem. Rabbeinu Arif. The Rambam, it's questionable what he holds. He's a little bit confusing in his lashon. But the Rosh goes ahead and says, no, we're posek like Rabbi Yossi, and you need a masoret, right? You need a tradition, right? So and halacha l'maaseh in the Shulchan Aruch is posek in Siman Pei that you do need you need the simani, but you also need the name. It needs to be called chagav. So you have Siman Pei Hey, which is a very short siman that discusses the laws of chagavim, right? And it says Simanei chagavim kol sheyesh lo dal raglaim dal knafayim knafav chofin utrubo. The wings have to cover most of it, etc. And then the Shulchan Aruch adds, and this is going to be the halacha for us, right? Is va'afal pi sheyesh bo kol hasimanim alalu, even though it has all the simanim, eno mutar ele miken shemo chagav. It has to be that its name is chagav.
That's what tradition
Right? And therefore you need a tradition, right? O sheyesh lahem masoret shemo chagav, or there's the tradition that's called chagav, right? So now we're stuck. If I go to Wyoming and I find some type of grasshopper, right? I can't necessarily eat it. I need to have a tradition that it's fine. Now, the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, he writes a fascinating thing. The Or HaChaim, in Vayikra, the Psukim over here, right? Now, it's important to remember that Or HaChaim was a rabbi in the 1700s in Morocco, right? So he's writing from Morocco. Huh? Right, then he moved. Right, then he moved. He gets eventually to Eretz Yisrael. Right, so, but he's writing in Morocco. Right, his Perush Or HaChaim ala Torah. Right, on the pasuk in Parashat Shmini that discusses the laws of grasshoppers and that it's mutar. He says the following. Ha'ikar ke Perush Rashi bazeh shetzarich sheyiyu lo kora'ayim arochim samuch letzavaro. There's a Rashi ala Torah. Rashi ala Torah says on the pasuk in Shemini that these knees need to be samuch letzavaro, close to its neck. Now says the Or HaChaim, this is a problem. right? Because look at the typical grasshopper. Where is the kiraim? The knees are in the back. Rashi is saying it needs to be samuch letzavaro, right? So says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, what are you talking about? This can't be kosher. The people in Morocco are eating this thing, right? And he's saying it's not kosher because it doesn't fit with Rashi's description. Rashi's description is that the kiraim are close to the neck, and this is not close to the neck, right? It should be right. It should be close to the head, right? Samuch letzavaro, and it's not like that, right? So the Or HaChaim HaKadosh says this is a problem. Now Rashi also adds, he says we're not sure really the differences, and therefore you see that Rashi holds, right, that they didn't eat it anymore. He says Rashi in Parshat Shmini says we have a lot of these things. That was the name in French that they used to use. We're not really knowledgeable to know exactly which ones are kosher, which ones are not kosher. So therefore Rashi seems to be saying that they didn't eat it. So if you ask the question, in northern France, Ashkenaz area, did they eat locusts? Did they eat grasshoppers? It sounds like from Rashi you could tell that they're not really eating them. He says, enanu b'ki'im b'hem, right? But if you fast forward to Morocco, in the time of Or HaChaim HaKadosh, he's saying that they did eat it. But Or HaChaim himself, Rabbi Chaim ben Attar, has a problem. He says, I don't like this, because it doesn't fit with Rashi's description. And he says, Ani heshivoti oto gam en mitzrim ele min echad, etc. And he says that the kol yerev chared, yerev yivchad, any person who has yirat shamayim should be fearful. The bal yoshit yado, the sheketz, he shouldn't touch this, he shouldn't eat this sheketz, right? And he shouldn't eat it at all. Now, he adds another line. He says, Miyom shenishmeu dvarai b'ma'arav, says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, from the time that my words were heard in the west, Dahainu, North Africa area, in Morocco, right? Upirshu mehem rabim, and many people stopped eating them. Lo nagah Hashem od b'makazo. Hashem did not send us this plague anymore, right? So they used to have problems with grasshoppers coming and eating the crops. The Or HaChaim HaKadosh got up, said a speech. He said, Rabotai, it's asur based on Rashi, right? And we don't really have a good tradition. We'll see, he expounds more about it. And he says that since the day that people started listening to me, no more grasshoppers came, right? And now in the Perush Or HaChaim HaKadosh, ala Torah, he writes that for 12 years already, there's no grasshoppers. Now, the Or HaChaim, besides for being a great Mefaresh HaChumash, right, he also has a sefer on Yoreh De'ah called Pri Toar. Right, the Pri Chadash wrote Sefer Pri Chadash, and Pri Toar wrote a rebuttal to the Sefer Pri Chadash, who argued on many of the Rishonim, many of the earlier Psakim. So the Pri Toar is a sefer written by Rabbi Chaim ben Attar also. And over there on this Siman Peheh, he discusses it again. And he tells you the whole story. He says, let me explain to you where this tradition came from. He says, it's not that they really had a good tradition. It's not true. Why? He says, what happened was, my grandfather was the chief rabbi in Morocco. That's what he says. The Rabbi Chaim ben Attar. And he says that there was a problem with locusts, as it seems to be in North Africa, in Africa, and these places, locusts seem to be a big deal, right? And he says what happened is that because there was no food, people started eating the locusts, the grasshoppers. And my grandfather, he was the rabbi then, and he didn't want to tell them no, because people are hungry and maybe it's okay. So he looked the other way. Right? And that's what he says. I heard from people who knew my grandfather very well, and that's what he said. And he wasn't really so cool with it, and therefore he says now we have to put a stop to it. Because it's not that we have a real tradition, he says. We don't really have a real tradition. People just started eating it, and the rabbis looked the other way because people were hungry, and therefore now we got to put a stop to it.
Similar to Bach allowing Chadash wheat and the euro, probably.
True, right? Exactly. If you read the Bach by Yashan, you say allowing Chadash, right? You say, oh, it's mutar, right? And then someone says, no, it's not true. He only allowed it because there was no other option, right? And all the Rishonim, they all say, because there's no option, right? So today, for sure, you should not have this kula. I'm not eating yashan. Right? They only, because their arm was twisted, right? Then they allowed it. But now, says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, right? Now, whatever he's saying, really, mikar adin, we should re-examine this and say that you cannot have this grasshoppers anymore.
More leniency.
This is true. It could be. It could very well be true. The Chadash, you mean? Chadash. Truth is that there's strong chance. I mean, obviously it depends on the type of grasshopper. We'll see in a second what there's more simanim that were given, but yeah, the chocolate covered. If you want garlic, there's different types. Right? So right. So this psak of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, right? It made big waves. Right? It really changed things. Now, Tunisia was all eating grasshoppers, and then they stopped. You see, many of the Chachmei Tunis, right? They were eating grasshoppers, and then because of the psak din of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, it was accepted. They said, okay, they stopped, even though we don't even know that they were eating it for the same reason. Meaning, the Or HaChaim HaKadosh came with the story and said, my grandfather allowed it, or it started at that time. But Tunisia is not close, it's far, right? And people are eating it there. But because of the psak of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, he says, no, it's not good, right? And especially because of his chashash of Rashi, right? The Rashi says that the knees have to be close to the neck, and they weren't close to the neck, right? So therefore they stopped. Right, so that's what happened because of Or HaChaim HaKadosh. But then there was a posek around 50 years after Or HaChaim HaKadosh. His name was Mordechai Petachia Berdugo, and he's a Sfarim Nofet Sufim. That was his Shalot Teshuvot, and he goes and he argues on Or HaChaim HaKadosh. Right, he was big stuff also, big posek, and he says no, it's not true. We do have a tradition. And he says you shouldn't just come around, because right now, even though the Or HaChaim HaKadosh said it's asur, many other communities were still eating it. And so he says, you're saying that all these Jews are doing something wrong. That's not okay. They have a tradition, they have their rabbis. So he pushes back on the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. And he says, no, really, it should be fine, it's fine. Right? So again, why? Because first of all, we have the simanim. We have all the simanim. Maybe it doesn't fit with the exact language of Rashi, but okay, but it fits with every other Rishon, right? So why should we be concerned with only Rashi? And maybe we could reread Rashi to mean something else, right? So why do you have to be so concerned for this Rashi, right? We do have a tradition. You're saying you're not sure where the tradition came from. Maybe the tradition did come from a good place. And anyway, the Rif holds you don't need a tradition, right? The Rif holds all you need is the simanim, so it should be fine, right? So that's the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. Right, that he's saying, right, that he's saying that it's a problem. You should stop doing it. However, the communities in Morocco, many of them continued eating it, right, and especially in Teman, they ad hayom hazeh they eat it, right. So if you go to the Yemenite communities, right, so they always ate it in Teman, and especially Rav Yosef Kapach. I was a big Temani scholar. He translated many of the Rambam's texts, the Pirush HaMishnayot, Moreh Nevuchim, right? So he lived in the 20th century, right? And he writes that in Yerushalayim in 1915, there was a great plague of grasshoppers, and it was a big problem. And all the Ashkenazim were starving, they were really hungry. But he says, what we did is we knew that these grasshoppers were kosher, because the Yemenite community always had a tradition. Right? And he said, so we ate it. We weren't hungry because we were able to eat the locust. Right? So you see, this is mamash creeping up again and again, that after the plague, you eat the locusts. Right? And the Temanim always had this tradition, and ad hayom hazeh they eat it. And Rabbi Shlomo Korach, who was the chief rabbi of Bnei Brak, Temani rabbi, posek, he also says ad hayom hazeh it's fine. And the Temanim even added, there's a Midrash HaGadol, which is a Midrash from the Tanaim officially, or maybe the Amoraim, but in this week's parasha, it says that the arbeh is kosher, and the Midrash itself gives a siman, another siman that's not mentioned in the Mishnah. And what's the siman? That on the belly, on the bottom of the grasshopper, there's a chet. So if you see here, it's not so easily seen, right? This is the Midrash. It's called Midrash HaGadol, right? Which is a Yemenite text. It's a Yemenite Midrash, and all the Yemenite Chachamim also quote it, right? That this chet over here. So some used to read it as chet, right, which stands for chagav, or halal, which means kosher in Arabic, right? The Yemenites speak Arabic. Or some used to read it as a chaf, right, kasher, right, kasher, right. But either way, to them, the Temanim, if you go to Temani, he'll flip over the grasshopper and he'll say, oh, it's kasher, right? And that was their tradition, right? So they say we very much have a tradition, right? Now,
he's going to Morocco next week. They're going to get some.
It's some garlic, some salt.
Listen, you got a chicken too? I don't want to eat.
Right? No, you see, it's true. You know, it's all subjective. The truth is, all our appetites are subjective.
These Sfardim, they even find
All
that
right.
pet?
Huh?
How do you find that pet?
That was their tradition. They had their tradition from way back, right?
The other simanim, meaning they saw the other simanim and then noticed this extra siman that when it had all the other ones that had a chet. Meaning if you just stop at the chet and you miss the other ones, then
But no, it has all the simanim, and they also had the tradition that this is the kosher one, right? Right.
so if you didn't have a chet, they wouldn't eat it.
I think so. I think you wouldn't eat it. It would be a specific species or group of species that are all going to be fine. Now,
They had tradition from the siman.
it sounds like it's another siman. Their tradition was that if it has the siman, it's fine, right? So really they had a way to preserve the tradition. But it's not just that. I don't think they were only somech on the chet. They knew this type of thing we eat. They could recognize it. They see it and they eat it, right? And now the important thing is that the temanim, they didn't eat every grasshopper with simanim, right? Because someone wanted to say that you can't rely on the temanim because maybe they hold like the Rif and the Rambam. We know that the temanim always were posek like the Rambam, and the Rambam always went and followed the Rif mainly, right? And so if the Rif and the Rambam are saying you don't need to have a tradition, so maybe that's why the temanim eat it. So the truth is that they looked into it, and Rabbi Yosef Kapach writes, it's not true. We don't eat all grasshoppers, right? We only eat the specific ones that we have a tradition for, right? Which means that we don't just rely on the simanim, right? Now it seems from what I've read about this, it seems that the ones that come in swarms are mutar. The ones that come not in swarms, if you go now into your backyard and you happen to find a grasshopper, right? It's not the type that comes in a group, in a swarm, and eats up, right? Those are usually asur. The ones that, that seems to be the nature of the ones that are mutar. I'm not saying it's a siman, I'm just saying that's what it seems from what I've read, that the ones that come in swarms, those are end up being the ones that are going to be mutar, regardless of the color. Some are yellow, some are red, some are black, whatever it is, right? But they're usually mutar. Right now, they have the chet on it, they have the simanim, and those are the ones that the temanim have this tradition for. Right?
Why did Rashi need to have the knees by the
Right, no. Right, no. So this is a great question, right? And Rabbi Kapach wants to he reinterprets. Oh, very good. The Gemara says that it does not need shechita, right? It's just like a fish. Just like a fish does not need a shechita, so too grasshoppers do not need shechita. And technically, you're allowed to eat it alive, except because there's ever minachai. You're not allowed to eat a limb from a live being, right? That's only if there's a mitzvah to be shocheted. But if there's no chiyuv to slaughter it, so then you're allowed to eat it alive. Just hold on a second. Very good. Hold on a second. The Gemara says that you shouldn't eat it alive because it's disgusting. It's about the shaktzu. And tsar balei chaim, right? So some say there's no tsar balei. There's a yavetz that says tsar balei chaim is not a problem if it's very small. If it's very small, it's not such a big deal. Tsar balei chaim.
They're massive. They're the size of your palm. Some of them.
Okay, so maybe then he would agree it's a problem,
Family,
right?
Huh?
No, but also, if there's a purpose, if there's a human purpose, we usually say also there's no tsar balei chaim. There's a human purpose. Now, if for whatever reason you have to eat it alive, but probably you should kill it anyway, right? Let's say I need to use my donkey, and my donkey's in pain because I need to pull stuff, right? Oh, very good question. Right, so the Gemara actually brings the opinion from the Tanaim that you should not say bracha on it because it's a siman klala, right? And the Tanaim talk about also that.
Sign. It was brought down for a curse.
Right, but we do hold you to say shakol on it, right? You say shakol, maybe you would say shechianu. I'm not sure if it's something that doesn't come often, right? That's a good question. I hear. Maybe no. We hold you make a bracha. We hold you make shakol. Even though it's a siman klal, we hold you make a shakol, right? Now, also it's brought down in the Mishnah also that when they would see one locust, they would already make a ta'anit right away. They would blow shofar and make a ta'anit because they see the plague was coming. That's just another time that the Tanaim mentioned the locust. Now, what's the next section of the sugya, right, is what's relevant for all of us who are not temanim, right? What? Yeah, it's shakol. It's like meat. It's the same. Kazai, yeah, same thing. Now, I don't know how many, right? I don't know. And they said it's 62% fat, 62% protein, 17% fat. It's a very nutritional value, right? Yeah. Right. I read an article. They said that there was a crazy storm, a state plague in Australia, and they wanted just to get rid of them. the government wanted people to eat them. So they branded it as sky prawns. Prawns is a type of shekets that the goyim eat. So, oh, it's sky prawns, right? They wanted people to eat it, right? So you see, right? Well, they wouldn't eat it if it's grasshoppers. Oh, you call it a prawn? Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, they'll eat it. Right. Now the next section of the sugya, right, is now. Let's say you don't have a masoret. Let's say, right, you're not from Teman, you're not from Morocco, right, and you don't have a masoret. Right, so now am I allowed to rely on the Yemenite Masoret? Big Talmid Chacham, Rabbi Shlomo Korach, Yosef Kapach, many communities of Temanim, they're sitting there dipping their grasshoppers in hummus. I want to try it also, right? Is it okay? Is it not okay? Morty doesn't want to try it, right? You know, right? Right? Is it mutar or is it not mutar? Right? So now we get into the question. Yeah, you go to Morocco, you go to Teman, exactly, right? Yeah. So the question is, so over here we get into the question of something that needs a masoret, something that needs a tradition, right? And can I rely on your tradition, right? Am I allowed to rely on your tradition, a different community's tradition, or since my community didn't allow it, right? So therefore, my community says no. Right?
Because it was instituted, because
okay.
the sur is being placed to prevent them from violating the Torah.
Okay.
There was sometimes same thing can be explained here. Maybe that's not kosher.
So you can have. Okay, so you're on the side that said it's not. Okay, so we're going to develop this. Your point is very important, but there's another point. There's another twist to this. What's going on over here? Right? So this sugya really comes up in birds also, because birds also, even though we have simanim, Rashi writes you have to have a masoret, right? And that's why Turkey is the whole question, because Turkey there can't be a masoret. Turkey came from the New World, it came from America, so it can't be a masoret. So it's a big question how we eat turkey, right? But we eat turkey. Today is a tradition. I mean, it's fine, mutar, right? But most poskim will tell you it's mutar, right? But really, birds. You're not supposed to take us the bird off and say, oh, look, it looks like a kosher bird. I read the simanim that the Gemara says and say it's fine. Rashi writes, you need a masoret, you need a tradition, right? So the same question of relying on other traditions comes up with the birds, right? And now the question is, right, can I rely on the Yemenites for their tradition in locusts in Arbe? Now the Rosh writes, writes that indeed you are allowed to rely on a different tradition as long as you know that community was a community of Tamid Chachamim. Right, so the Rosh was asked about a certain type of bird that in southern France, that's what it seems the place he was talking about, it's called Provence, Languedoc region, they were eating a certain bird, and the Rosh, in a very proud way, he says that I come from a tradition of rabbis in Ashkenaz, right? The Rosh, his story was that he had to flee from Ashkenaz, he went to Spain, right? So in Ashkenaz, there were many Tamidei Chachamim, right? In Spain, there are many Tamid Chachamim, but he says, you guys, you're eating this bird. I don't know if you guys, I can't really trust your tradition. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have many Tamid Chachamim. I can't really trust your tradition. So therefore he says, I'm not going to rely to eat this bird, right? But if you have a place that has Tamid Chachamim, so you could rely on it. Now, let's read the Shulchan Aruch a second in Siman Pei Bet. Right, the Shulchan Aruch talks about this question. Im sh'ar mekomot she'en lehem masoret, a place that doesn't have a tradition, yecholim leochlo, are they allowed to eat it? Al smach, to rely based on makom sheyesh lehem masoret. So says the Shulchan Aruch, yesh mi she'oser, some say no, yesh mi she'matir, some say yes, veyesh lachush lidivrei ha'oser. You should be careful and to the opinion who says you shouldn't, right? So it sounds the Shulchan Aruch is coming and saying that you should be choshesh, that it should be asur. However, explains the Aharonim explain like this. The Shulchan Aruch is talking about a situation where I have grasshoppers in my backyard. I have this swarm of locusts. They come around every once in a while, and we bedafka don't eat it, right? If I ask my rabbi, do we eat this? So he says, no, I don't think so. I don't have a tradition either way, but we don't actively eat this stuff. We don't actively eat this bird, even though we have the bird. Right? Let's say it's a bird, a certain bird that we're not sure if we have a tradition about, right?
So we're relating the same thing to grasshoppers.
Exactly. So let's say grasshoppers. I have grasshoppers. We have it every once in a while. Do we eat it? No, we don't eat it. I ask the rabbi, can I eat it? He says, I don't think so, right? And now you go to Teman and you see that they eat it. So what do you say? Says the Shulchan Aruch, Yesh lachush lemishu said you shouldn't rely on it. Why? Because you had the grasshoppers in your backyard all along, and you apparently did not have a tradition that it's fine. So it seems that your tradition is saying that it's wrong, that it's asur,
Why is it a
right?
tradition? You just don't know anything. You're just ignorant.
But you had it.
Everyone knows nothing about grasshoppers. You know nothing. So you're like, oh, they look delicious.
But no, but wouldn't
Wouldn't
you assume the rabbi knows? Wouldn't you assume that his rabbi knew? You're living in Morocco for many years, right? Right. No. So it would seem.
What he said, I'm not sure. We don't know.
Right. No, you're right. So there's some people that would say in that case you don't have a strong tradition. You could rely on them. However, there's some who say that maybe not. Maybe the reason why you don't eat it is because the original rabbis who came here said that no, it's wrong, and therefore you have a conflicting tradition. So maybe you can't eat it. However, say the Haronim, and this is a very important point. If I live in a place where I don't have locusts, right? I don't have them at all, right? So then I don't have an active minhag against eating it. We just don't have them. So exactly. So then it's going to be fine. So on Pesach, right? I have rice, but I dafka don't eat rice. Not me. I eat rice. Right? I'm saying, let's say you're from a place that doesn't eat rice, right? So you dafka have a minhag not to eat rice, because look, you have rice in the pantry, but you're dafka not eating it. So that becomes a minhag. But if you just are from a place that doesn't own rice, the rice doesn't show up there, right? So then you don't have an active minhag against anything, right? So therefore, the poskim all really want to say that it's fine. You're allowed to rely on the Yemenite tradition. Why? Because where'd you live? In Syria, in Aleppo, they didn't really have grasshoppers, right? Or you could also say that even if they did have it, they didn't eat it. Who would eat it? It's disgusting, right? No one wants to eat it, etc., right? So therefore, the fact that we don't eat it isn't a proof against the kashrut. It's not a proof at all, right? By the bird, it's a good bird. It tastes very well. Why are you guys not eating it? Oh, that's a proof that there's some tradition, right? But by the grasshoppers, what type of proof is that? No one wants to eat grasshoppers, stam, unless there's this crazy need to eat it. No one's really going to eat it. So therefore, you're not really going to have a tradition, right? So therefore, you have many poskim. All the Yemenite poskim say that all the Ashkenazim and Sfarad, everyone's allowed to have it, right? All the Yemenite poskim are all posek that it's mutar for everybody, right? They eat it themselves, right? But not just them. There's a shmuah that I read from Rav Moshe Sternbach, right? Rav Moshe Sternbach, Sheikhel L'orech Yamim Tovim Arukim. He is a radical Yerushalmi type of posek. He's not a Mekel, he's a Kanoi, right? He lives in Yerushalayim. He's the Ga'avad of the Edah Haredit. That's the group that doesn't even vote in Israel, right? And he said that Ashkenazim could eat it. Wow. Right? So he said Ashkenazim could eat it based on the Masoret of the Temanim. Right? No, rice, they have an active minhag against, right? Meaning they have this minhag kitniyot. That's the whole distinction, that rice, they could eat it, but they dafka don't. But grasshoppers, they just never had it, right? So therefore, it's, right? So b'kitzur, this is the...
In your area, you never have it, and you go to a place that does have it, you're allowed to eat it.
Exactly, because I don't have any active Masoret tradition against it, right?
This is an explicit prohibition.
Right, exactly. And you told me Reb Hershel Schechter ate it, right? You saw on video.
Not rice on Pesach,
but grasshoppers, right? Exactly, grasshoppers, right? So.
He's saying, how could you let it eat it? It's a plague.
No, it's a bad omen. It's a bad sign that Hashem sent it. But
Torah explicitly says you're allowed to eat certain locusts. Even before the Haggadah, the Torah allowed it?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
It's allowed.
There was no Torah before the plague. It was after.
Oh, you mean the plague of in Mitzrayim?
Yeah.
In Mitzrayim, right? No. So what's interesting is that no, in times of Yoel was later, right? No, but the Torah says in the plague that lo nish'ar arbe echad b'chol gvul Mitzrayim. Why? Because otherwise they would eat it, right? And Rashi says Hashem wanted to take that away from them, that they don't even have that, right? So they'll stay hungry, right? They don't have food and they don't have the locusts to eat, right? But you see, that's what the Torah is saying, that really they would eat it, right? And the Torah itself does in Parashat Shmini, after the Torah is given, right? After they leave Mitzrayim, they get this mitzvah, and you're allowed to have grasshoppers, right? So that's the interesting story of grasshoppers, right? We have Makat Arbeh, we have the Torah allowing it, right? And then if the tradition is lost, really you're not supposed to eat it. The halacha l'maaseh is that you need a tradition, but even though you yourself don't have a tradition, you can rely on someone else's tradition, right? And now there are poskim who will argue on this. Then they'll be more mahmir and say no. But it seems a very strong svara to say that, like the poskim who are lenient and saying, first of all, the Shulchan Aruch says yesh mishimatir. He says before, it's an opinion that holds that even if you had them, you're allowed to eat them, even though you didn't have a tradition. Kol sheken, in the situation where you didn't have them, you're allowed to rely on the Yemenite rabbis to be able to have
That's
it.
what Hamavadi is saying.
I did not see that he had an opinion on this. It's interesting. I have to look it up.
Tradition, you or history? I mean, like if someone's a ger that chooses to be Ashkenaz, now their traditions are the lineage, or we have no traditions and I'm gonna eat rice on Pesach, I'm gonna eat grasshoppers.
How you choose what you get converted into? They ask you.
Right. So if he
We were saying about backyards and stuff,
right. No. So a ger really he could choose, right? But if he joins a certain community, so he's supposed to take on to everything of the community. But today it's a big balagan. You live in Cedarhurst, there's Ashkenaz, Sephardi, this, that.
really world.
Right. It's a big balagan, so it's very hard to say this is minhag makom. Right.
Same if someone who grew up was not religious, but just
Yeah.
the historically they're sorry. So
Also not, because minhag is a reality. If the reality of the custom doesn't exist, because for 2 generations they weren't religious, so there's no minhag. So therefore they can go ahead and
become Ashkenaz because they just stick to the minhagim. Maybe it's a problem the first generation, but then you're saying later on.
yeah, that's his minhag now, right? That's his minhag now.
My father never had, for example, cheese and lox on the bagel ever in his life. He won't.
He still won't.
Me, it's like normal, but when I did it in front of him, he's doing this. It's not kosher.
Right. That's right. That's the subject of another shiur. The Ta'ut Sofer and the Bet Yosef.
With the Temani guy, it's a norm. The guy in Europe, it wasn't a norm.
Right.
Just because it's not regular to him.
Doesn't mean yeah. Doesn't mean it exactly.
Could Emmanuel eat it in front of his father?
All right, Hazak Baruch. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
Am I able to eat
Thank
it or
you.
not?
Mutar.
Thank God.
Ashkenaz most of them. Sternbach said yes.
Sternbach.
Yeah.
If I do a da'at and okay.
It could be, yeah.